The quiet man in the hallway. It started with silence. Not the awkward kind. Not the silence that fills a room when no one knows what to say. This was different. This was the kind of silence that carried weight. The kind of silence that followed. A man like a shadow, calm and steady. That man was Keanu Reeves. And on that rainy Monday morning in Los Angeles, he stood at the far end of a narrow hallway inside the backstage area of a talk show studio. His eyes were lowered. His hands were folded in front of him. And although there were people rushing around, yelling into headsets, pushing cameras, adjusting lights, he remained still. Jim Carrey saw him first. Jim wasn't supposed to be there. He had just wrapped an early press interview upstairs, and instead of heading to the parking lot, something told him to wander the halls. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fate. Whatever it was, it led him to a quiet hallway where a man stood alone like he didn't belong, yet somehow belonged more than anyone else. Jim froze when he realized who it was. "Keanu?" he asked softly, not sure if he was interrupting a moment. Keanu looked up, eyes calm, face unreadable, and then he smiled. Just a little. The kind of smile that said, "It's good to see you," without a word. "Jim," Keanu said, "you look tired." Jim laughed. "You look like you haven't aged in 20 years. They both chuckled. The hallway wasn't just a hallway anymore. It became a place where two legends stood side by side, both carrying stories the world didn't know. What the cameras never captured was what came next, a conversation that changed Jim Carrey's heart forever. "You okay?" Jim asked, lowering his voice. Keanu paused. He wasn't the type to answer right away. He looked down at the floor, then slowly leaned against the wall like he was thinking back through years of memories. "I just came to listen," Keanu said finally. "Listen to what?" Keanu's eyes moved toward a nearby green room door. Behind it, a young musician was practicing for his big TV debut. His fingers stumbled across the keys, his voice cracked, and someone inside scolded him. "They're nervous," Keanu whispered. "First time on live television. Someone told me about him, said he looked up to me. I just wanted to be nearby in case he needed someone." Jim didn't know what to say. This was Hollywood. No one showed up just to support a stranger. Keanu did. And as the conversation unfolded, Jim realized something strange. Keanu wasn't promoting a film. He wasn't booked for a segment. He wasn't there for fame or recognition. He was simply there. Because he cared. This was the moment Jim Carrey understood what people meant when they called Keanu a mystery. He wasn't mysterious because he was quiet. He was mysterious because he was rare. In a world where everyone was trying to be seen, Keanu chose to see others. "You do this a lot?" Jim asked, stunned. Keanu shrugged. "I don't know. It just feels right. When I was younger, someone did it for me." And that's when the real story began. The rain outside hadn't let up. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance as Keanu and Jim walked side by side toward a small staff kitchen. They poured 2 cups of lukewarm coffee and sat at the table like 2 old souls catching up after decades apart. Jim leaned forward. "You know, Keanu, I've been through some dark places. Sometimes, even when everyone's watching you, you feel completely invisible. But watching you today, it's like you make people feel like they matter. How do you do that?" Keanu didn't answer at first. He stared at the steam rising from his coffee. Then he said something so soft that Jim had to lean in to hear it. "Because I know what it feels like not to matter." The silence returned. But now it wasn't heavy. It was honest. Keanu didn't need to explain. He didn't have to tell Jim about the years of pain, the loss of loved ones, the heartbreaks that never healed. It was all there, behind his eyes. "When my sister was sick," Keanu continued, "I used to sit beside her hospital bed and read stories no one knew. I didn't tell the press. I didn't want sympathy. I just wanted her to feel loved. And when she smiled, that was enough." Jim swallowed hard. This wasn't a headline, this wasn't a publicity stunt. This was a man who had every reason to be bitter yet somehow chose to be kind. Just then the green room door opened. A young man stepped out. He was thin, shaking, barely 19. His name was Caleb. His hands trembled as he wiped sweat from his brow, clutching a guitar like it was the only thing holding him together. When he saw Keanu, his eyes widened. You're him," Caleb stammered. Keanu stood slowly, giving the boy a soft nod. "You did well. I messed up the chords. But you didn't give up," Keanu replied. Jim watched the moment with quiet admiration. Caleb looked like he might cry. "I was gonna cancel," the boy said. "This morning I almost ran. I didn't think I was good enough. But then they told me you were here, just sitting, waiting. Why?" Keanu stepped closer and placed a hand gently on Caleb's shoulder. "Because someone believed in me once," he said, "and I wanted to return the favor." After Caleb returned to the green room, Jim turned to Keanu and whispered, "You didn't have to come here. You didn't have to do any of this." Keanu's eyes were gentle. "I know, but sometimes the things you don't have to do are the most important ones." Jim felt something shift in his chest, a kind of warmth he hadn't felt in years. It was the feeling of watching someone do good without needing credit. "You're what every man aspires to be," Jim said suddenly. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "I'm just trying to be someone I wouldn't be ashamed of when no one's watching." The hallway was quiet again as the two men stood up to leave. Rain still whispered against the windows. Caleb's soft music echoed faintly in the background, and somewhere deep inside Jim Carrey, a light had been reignited. He would go on to mention Keanu's name in interviews. He would call him a real man, a good man, the kind of person the world needed more of. But what no one knew, what cameras didn't see, was that it all began in a quiet hallway with a silent man who simply showed up. A man who believed that kindness didn't need a reason. A man named Keanu Reeves. The broken mirror and the forgotten letter. The next morning, the internet was buzzing. Someone had leaked a short clip from backstage. It showed Keanu Reeves walking out of the green room, patting a nervous young musician on the back and then quietly exiting the studio through a side door. No security guards. No entourage. Just him, a simple hoodie, and a warm smile. People online didn't know what to make of it. The comments flooded in. Why was Keanu there? Did he know that kid? He left without saying a word. Classic Keanu. Jim Carrey hadn't said a thing yet. He hadn't tweeted. He hadn't posted on Instagram. Instead, he sat in his living room staring at an old photo album. It was from his early comedy years, before the fame, before the money, before the pressure to be someone bigger than himself. He kept going back to one photo in particular. It was of him and Keanu on the set of a forgotten movie, laughing over something that didn't matter. Neither of them were big names back then, just two young men trying to make a mark. But now, decades later, only one of them had stayed the same. Jim picked up his phone and texted Keanu. "Still thinking about yesterday. Lunch?" No reply. Keanu was already in a different part of town. He had driven out to a quiet cemetery just past the hills. There was no camera crew, no press, no one waiting for autographs. He parked under a tree and stepped out, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers he picked himself that morning. He walked across the grass with slow, careful steps until he reached a headstone marked with a simple name, Jennifer Syme. He knelt down. The breeze was soft, brushing his hair away from his face. "Hi," he whispered. "It's been a while." He didn't say much more. He never did. Keanu believed that words often failed where silence spoke louder. He sat beside the grave, knees bent, eyes distant, remembering a life that could have been. The woman he loved, the daughter they lost, the pieces of his heart buried in that ground. After a long time, he took something out of his jacket. A small envelope aged at the corners. He had written it years ago and never delivered it. Inside was a letter, sealed but never opened. Today, he finally placed it at the base of the stone. Meanwhile, Jim Carrey was pacing inside a coffee shop downtown. He kept checking his phone, waiting for Keanu's reply. The lunch table he had reserved was empty except for one untouched glass of water. Suddenly, a soft jingle of the bell at the entrance rang. It wasn't Keanu. It was Caleb, the same young Musician from the studio. Mr. Carrey? Caleb said, unsure. Someone told me you might be here. Jim blinked. You're Caleb, right? Come in, sit down. The boy slid into the seat across from him. His hands were still shaking, just like yesterday. He told me to find you, Caleb said. Who? Keanu, the boy whispered. He said you'd understand. Jim leaned forward. Understand what? Caleb reached into his backpack and pulled out something wrapped in an old cloth. Carefully, he unwrapped it to reveal a broken hand mirror. It was cracked down the center, its edges chipped. I don't get it, Jim said. This belonged to his mother, Caleb said. He told me she used to carry it everywhere. Even when she couldn't afford a full meal, she kept this mirror in her purse. He said she would look into it and remind herself, I'm still here, I'm still standing. Jim felt his throat tighten. Why give it to you? Caleb smiled nervously. Because I was going to quit music. My mom passed away last year and I didn't think I had the strength to keep going. Keanu sat beside me after my rehearsal and said, every crack in this mirror tells a story. Don't throw yourself away just because you're broken. Then he gave it to me. Jim was speechless. After Caleb left, Jim sat there staring at the mirror. It was more than glass, it was a message. A message Keanu didn't have to say aloud. Every soul is cracked. Every heart has scars. But there is still beauty in the broken pieces. Later that day, Jim finally got a reply. A short text. Just 4 words. I'll meet you tonight. They met at an old diner on the edge of town. The kind of place with faded menus, chipped tables, and waitresses who called you hon, even if they didn't know your name. Keanu arrived quietly, as always. He wore a worn-out coat and a pair of jeans that had seen better days. Jim was already seated with 2 plates of mashed potatoes and meatloaf waiting. You remembered my favorite, Keanu said. You remembered Caleb, Jim replied. They both laughed softly. After a few minutes, Jim pulled out the broken mirror and placed it on the table. He told me, Jim said. Keanu nodded, his eyes misty. I kept that mirror for years. Every time life felt too hard, I'd look into it and remind myself that being broken doesn't mean you're useless. It just means you've survived. Jim leaned back. Why give it away now? Keanu paused. Because I think Caleb needed it more. And what about you? Keanu tapped his chest gently. I've already got something stronger. Jim raised a brow. What's that? Faith, Keanu said. Not in some higher power, but in people. In the idea that someone's kindness can carry you through a storm. Someone did that for me once. It's my turn now. The next day, Jim walked into a live interview on national television. When the host asked him about Hollywood, about aging in the spotlight, about what still inspired him, Jim Carrey said something that surprised everyone. You know what inspires me, Keanu Reeves. Not the actor, not the stuntman, not the action hero, but the man who sits quietly with broken people and reminds them they're not alone. The audience clapped politely, not sure if they understood. But Jim didn't care. He knew his words weren't meant for the crowd. They were for Caleb. They were for Keanu. They were for anyone holding their broken pieces, wondering if they still mattered. Jim looked into the camera and said, You don't need to be famous to be a light in someone's life. You just need to show up. And believe me, Keanu always shows up. As the credits rolled on that interview, the camera cut backstage just for a second. And in the far corner of the hallway, there he was again, Keanu Reeves, not saying a word, just listening, just present, just human. The note under the plate, the next few days passed quietly. Keanu stayed away from the spotlight like always. No press, events, no interviews, no red carpet. While headlines speculated over his mysterious kindness, he remained exactly where he felt most comfortable, unnoticed. But what people didn't realize was that behind every quiet step he took, someone's world was changing. Across town, Caleb sat alone in a small diner, the same one where Keanu and Jim had met. He had the cracked mirror in his pocket and a songbook open in front of him. He scribbled lyrics furiously, stopped, scratched them out, and started again. Nothing sounded right. Nothing felt good enough. The waitress approached. "Want some coffee, sweetie?" Yeah. Black, please," he said softly. She poured him a cup, then noticed the photo sticking out from his songbook, a picture of Keanu Reeves cut from a magazine. "You a fan?" "More like a student," Caleb said. She smiled. "He comes here sometimes, always leaves big tips, always sits in the corner booth, never wants attention." Caleb looked over at the booth. "You know," the waitress continued. "Last time he came, he left something strange." Caleb blinked. "Left something?" She walked behind the counter and came back with a small folded note. "I didn't open it. Figured it was for someone. Maybe you?" Hands shaking, Caleb took the note. He unfolded it slowly, like it might disappear. If he moved too fast, it said, "If you're reading this, then the world hasn't broken you yet. Good, now don't let it. You're stronger than you think, and someone out there, someone you've never met, is rooting for you, believe that." Keanu below. The note, scribbled in messy ink, was a postscript. "P.S. The world needs your music. Don't make it wait." Caleb pressed the note to his chest, feeling tears sting his eyes. That evening, Jim Carrey called Keanu again. "I want to do something," he said. "Something that actually matters." "Like what?" Keanu asked. "A show. Not about us. About the forgotten people. The artists, the nurses, the janitors, the kids. The ones nobody notices." Keanu was quiet. "You want me to host?" he asked. Jim laughed. "No, I want you to help me find them." Keanu's voice was calm. "I already have." By the end of the week, word had spread about Caleb's performance. Someone had recorded his studio rehearsal, the rough version, the nervous one, and shared it online. But instead of mocking him, the internet responded with warmth. Comments flooded in. "This kid's voice is raw and real. He sounds like he's hurting and healing. Who's the guy sitting behind him at the piano? Wait, is that Keanu Reeves?" The video went viral. Caleb didn't even know until his phone started buzzing nonstop. Then one afternoon, he received a call from an unknown number. "Hello?" he answered. "Is this Caleb?" Yes. I'm with The Light Project. Mr. Carrey and Mr. Reeves recommended you for our first episode." "Wait, what?" "We want you to perform live, in front of a crowd. Your story, your song." Caleb nearly dropped the phone. Meanwhile, Keanu stood in a quiet church, far from Hollywood. The pews were empty. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting colors across the floor. He sat in the back row, alone, looking up at a wooden cross. Not because he was religious, but because it reminded him of something simple. Sacrifice. Not for recognition, not for praise, but out of love. A priest walked by and nodded gently. "You lost someone?" he asked. Keanu smiled faintly. "Many someones. But you still come here?" "Because silence listens when words fail," Keanu replied. The priest nodded again. "You know, I've seen you before, the man from the movies." Keanu tilted his head. "I'm not who people think I am." "Then who are you?" Keanu paused. "Just someone trying to do one good thing each day." A week later, Caleb stepped onto a stage in downtown Los Angeles. The small theater was packed. Jim Carrey stood in the back, smiling proudly. Keanu was nowhere to be seen. The crowd went silent. Caleb walked up to the microphone, guitar in hand. "Before I play," he said nervously, "I want to thank someone. Someone who reminded me that broken people still have a voice. Someone who told me I was enough even when I didn't believe it." He took a deep breath. "This is for him." He strummed the first chord. His voice shook for the first few lines, then steadied, then soared. He sang about pain, about healing, about mirrors that break and still reflect light. And when he finished, the theater erupted in applause. Backstage, a stagehand handed him a folded paper. It was a printout of a message. From Keanu Reeves, subject, "Proud. You stood tall, Caleb. You didn't just play music. You told the truth. Keep going. Someone else needs to hear your voice next. Pass it on. Caleb smiled. He looked out at the audience, eyes scanning every face. And there, just near the exit, stood a man in a baseball cap and hoodie. He didn't clap. He just nodded. And disappeared. That night, Jim Carrey sat down for an interview with a late-night host. But instead of telling jokes or promoting a movie, he did something unexpected. He talked about Keanu. You know, people always ask me what it's like to work with him, Jim said. But you know what I tell them now? I don't care about working with him. I care about learning from him. Learning what? The host asked. How to be human, Jim replied. The crowd fell quiet. He shows up, Jim continued. When no one's watching, when no one says thank you, he sits beside people the world forgets. He listens. And he never makes it about him. The host leaned forward. Do you think we need more keenness? Jim smiled. No, I think we need to be more like him. Outside the studio, a young girl sat on the curb crying. She had lost her wallet, missed her bus, and had no phone battery left. A man walked up slowly, crouched beside her. You okay? He asked. She shook her head. He handed her a bottle of water and offered a charger. My name's Keanu, he said gently. Let's figure this out together. The kindness chain. The next morning, the little girl who sat crying on the curb was front-page news. Not because of who she was, but because of who helped her. Her name was Maya. Just 14 years old. She had come to the studio with her older brother, hoping to catch a glimpse of Jim Carrey or one of the celebrities entering the building. But in the crowd, she got separated. Her phone died. She couldn't find her brother, and her small purse had been stolen. Wallet, bus card, everything gone. The article read, Stranded Girl Rescued by Stranger. Turns out to be Keanu Reeves. But what the article didn't say was the real part. Not the fame, not the photos. The part that really mattered. Keanu didn't just help her charge her phone. He stayed with her until her brother was found. He walked her to the nearest bus stop. He sat with them both on the bench and told them a story about how he once got lost in New York when he was young and didn't have a single dollar on him. He spoke in soft tones, never mentioned his name, never let anyone take a photo. Maya only found out who he was when her brother whispered, Do you know who that is? She didn't care. To her, he was just a kind man who made her feel safe when she needed it most. Meanwhile, Jim Carrey was making calls. He had taken Keanu's quiet influence and turned it into something bigger. Something real. Something that could reach further than either of them could alone. He launched the kindness chain, a simple project, one that connected everyday people who had been lifted up by someone, no matter how small the moment, and helped them pass it forward. Instead of money, it was about action, about sharing a sandwich, about helping someone carry groceries, about giving a tired stranger a place to rest. Every time someone did a good deed, they wrote a short note and left it behind for the next person. Keanu didn't want to be the face of it. He just wanted to be part of it. At a small diner in New Mexico, an elderly man sat at the corner table, coughing into his napkin. His hands trembled as he counted loose change for a bowl of soup. The waitress gently placed her hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, she said. Someone already paid for your meal. He looked confused. Who? He asked. She smiled and handed him a small folded note. This one's on me. Because you matter. A friend. He looked around the room. And in the booth by the window, a man in a black hoodie and baseball cap quietly raised his coffee cup. Just once. No smile, no wave, just a nod. The old man nodded back. Keanu drove across states in an old truck that had seen better days. It had no GPS, no air conditioning. Just a pile of maps, a half-full thermos of coffee, and a glove compartment full of folded letters, each one addressed to no one, and to everyone. He would stop at gas stations, laundromats, rest stops, and leave notes behind. In one, he wrote, Your past doesn't disqualify you. If you woke up today, you've already won the first battle. In another, you are not invisible, not to me. He left one taped to a bus seat in Chicago. "Whoever you are, I believe in you. Now go show the world." These weren't grand gestures, but they were changing people's lives. One evening, Jim received a call. "We got over 10,000 messages," his assistant said. "People writing in, people who received Keanu's notes, people who started doing the same thing. The kindness chain is spreading." Jim smiled. "And Keanu? He hasn't said a word. He's just moving." Jim looked out the window, the city lights blinking beneath the stars. Then he whispered, "Good. Let's keep it that way." At a high school in Detroit, a boy named Jalen had been skipping classes. He was quiet, angry, tired. His teachers thought he didn't care. But the truth was, Jalen was taking care of his sick mother every night. He worked a part-time job to help with rent. School didn't seem important when his world was falling apart. One afternoon, he sat under the bleachers alone, thinking about quitting. Then he saw something, a folded napkin, stuck between two metal bars. Curious, he reached for it. On it were 5 words, "I see the fight in you." He turned it over, written in small, neat handwriting. K.R. Jalen didn't know who wrote it, but something about it felt real. He held onto that napkin like it was gold. The next day he came to school on time, then the next, then the next. By the end of the week, he helped a girl in his class finish her math homework. He wrote her a note on a torn piece of paper. "You're smarter than you believe." And so, the chain continued. Back in Los Angeles, Jim and Keanu sat on a park bench overlooking a wide field where kids were playing soccer. "You know," Jim said, "people think they need to change the world all at once." Keanu nodded slowly. "But it's enough to change one day for one person." Jim smiled. "That's what you're doing." Keanu turned to look at him. "So are you." A little girl ran up with a flower and handed it to them. Keanu took it gently. "What's this for?" he asked. The girl shrugged. "You looked like you needed something pretty." He tucked the flower into his jacket pocket. "Thank you," he said as she ran off. Jim leaned back. "I still don't get it," he said. "Get what?" "How you do all this. How you've been through so much now and still choose to love the world." Keanu looked out at the children laughing in the grass. "Because no one wins by holding on to pain," he said. "But if I can turn it into something soft, to something warm, maybe it stops with me." Jim was quiet. Then he stood. "I'm going to write about this," he said. "Everything." Keanu smiled faintly. "Not about me. Write about them. The people who feel invisible. Make them seen." Jim nodded, then turned. But before he walked away, Keanu added one last thing. "And Jim? Yeah? Thank you for seeing me." At a printing press the next morning, Jim Carrey handed a stack of handwritten stories to an editor. Each one was about someone touched by the kindness chain. None of them mentioned Keanu by name, but the signature at the bottom of each page was the same. "Someone who believes in you." When the world finally noticed, 3 weeks passed, and something unexpected happened. It started with a single article. It was a soft piece, tucked inside the lifestyle section of a national newspaper. The title read, "The Man Behind the Kindness Chain." The article didn't name Keanu Reeves directly, but it described a tall, quiet man in a hoodie, someone who left notes in gas stations, someone who paid for strangers' meals, someone who sat beside the broken and listened without ever needing to fix them. It wasn't hard to guess who they were talking about. Keanu's fans immediately recognized the pattern, and before long, hashtags began trending. "Thank you, Keanu." "The kindness chain." "Notes from Keanu, but." The real shift happened when a high school teacher in Ohio gave her students an assignment to write about a stranger who had impacted their life. More than half the class wrote about a man they'd never spoken to, a man who left words when they needed them most, a man who believed in people more than the world ever had. One of the letters read, "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but the note you left at the hospital waiting room stopped me from giving up. I was sitting there after my dad's third surgery, and your words made me breathe again. Thank you, whoever you are. Another said. I failed my exam. I felt like a failure. But then I opened my locker and found your note. You are not your worst day. I taped it to my mirror. I still read it every morning. These letters found their way to social media, and then to talk shows, and then to headlines. But the one who stayed silent was Keanu. Jim Carrey tried to call him, again and again. No answer. He left a voicemail. Keanu, the world knows. It's out now. People are looking for you. They want to celebrate you. Still no reply. But Jim wasn't worried. He knew where. Keanu would be, not on a red carpet, not at a press conference, but somewhere quiet, somewhere human. And he was right. Keanu was sitting at the back of a children's library. A little girl was reading a book aloud, her voice shaky but brave. Beside her sat her mother, newly out of rehab, holding her daughter's hand like it was the only anchor she had. Keanu had met them 2 weeks earlier, at a bus stop, on a rainy night. The woman was cold, scared, ashamed. Keanu gave her his coat and a ride to a shelter. She didn't recognize him, just saw a man who didn't flinch when she cried. Now she was reading again, smiling again, healing, and Keanu sat in the back, watching, listening, not asking for anything. When the story ended, the girl ran to him and hugged him tightly. You came back? She squealed. I said I would, Keanu whispered, kneeling, down to her level. You have a powerful voice, don't ever stop using it. She beamed, her mother mouthed, thank you. Keanu just nodded. Later that evening, Jim finally found him, not in a big city, but in a small town park, feeding ducks with a paper bag of bread. I've been looking everywhere, Jim said, walking up. Beside him, Keanu handed him a slice of bread. You found me, he said simply. Jim sat beside him on the bench. You're trending worldwide. Keanu didn't respond. Your words, your notes, they're changing people. Don't you want to say something? Keanu tore a piece of bread and tossed it into the pond. I said what I needed to say, he replied, and they heard it. Jim exhaled. But people want to see you. They want to thank you. Keanu turned slightly. Then thank them back. Remind them that the kindness doesn't stop with me. I'm just a mirror, Jim. People don't see me, they see what they hope to be. Jim looked at him, eyes wet with quiet emotion. You really believe that? I do. The next morning, Jim went live on national television. He wore no makeup, no bright suit, just a simple gray shirt. And when the cameras rolled, he held up one of the notes Keanu had written years ago. The smallest light still breaks the darkest night. He looked straight into the lens. This is for all of you watching, he said. There is a man out there, someone you may never meet, who walks through this world like a whisper. He doesn't ask to be noticed. He doesn't want fame. But he leaves behind kindness like breadcrumbs. And if you've ever felt alone or broken or invisible, know this. He sees you. And more importantly, he believes in you. The studio fell silent, and Jim ended with one sentence. Let's be more like him. Meanwhile, across the country, people were doing just that. At a hospital in Florida, a nurse wrote a note for a cancer patient. You are more than your illness. At a bakery in Maine, a young man paid for a stranger's birthday cake and left a message. Someone is proud of you, even if they haven't said it yet. In a prison library, an inmate found a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo with a note tucked inside. You can still rewrite your ending. Keanu never asked for any of this. He never planned for it. But sometimes the most powerful movements begin with a whisper, not a shout. Later that week, a woman in her 80s showed up at the park bench where Keanu liked to feed ducks. She held a wrinkled piece of paper in her hand. When she sat beside him, she didn't say a word for a long time. Then gently she placed the paper in his lap. It was one of his first notes. You are not forgotten. She looked at him through tired eyes. I found this in my mailbox 7 years ago. I was going to end everything that night. And then I read that note. I didn't know who sent it until I saw your face in the news. Keanu looked down at the paper. The ink was faded. The corners were torn, but the words were still there. I kept it in my Bible, she said. Every day. He reached over and held her hand. Thank you, she said softly, for saving me. Keanu shook his head. You saved yourself, he whispered. I just left the light on. Back at Jim's home, a pile of letters kept growing. Handwritten stories. Thank you notes. People asking how they could join the kindness chain. Jim sat at his kitchen table, overwhelmed. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message from Keanu. Just 4 words. We're just getting started. Full circle. The world was watching now. News outlets around the globe ran special segments. Celebrities posted tributes. People started leaving kindness notes in airports, train stations, bathroom mirrors, bus seats, lockers, park benches, anywhere. Someone might need a reason to keep going. And somehow, without ever speaking into a microphone, Keanu Reeves had become the voice of something much bigger than himself. A movement. A reminder. A heartbeat. But even as people celebrated him, he stayed. Quiet, always just out of reach. Never chasing the praise. Never needing the spotlight. Jim Carrey, however, wasn't done yet. We're doing it, Jim told his team one morning. One final event. They all looked at him. What kind of event? We're going to fill a theater with people who were touched by Keanu's notes, he said. And we're going to give him something he's never asked for, but absolutely deserves. A tribute? A thank you, Jim said. A real one. The invitation was simple. You are invited to the Night of Notes, a celebration of unseen kindness. Keanu's name was not printed anywhere. And yet, when the doors opened on the night of the event, every seat was filled. Young, old, rich, poor. From teachers to truck drivers, from nurses to musicians. They all came with one thing in common. They had been touched by an anonymous note or a random act of kindness. Some clutched pieces of paper. Others held stories in their hearts. Some had traveled miles. Others just walked across the street. But they all came to say the same thing. Thank you. Backstage, Keanu stood frozen when he saw the size of the crowd. You didn't tell me it would be like this, he whispered to Jim. Jim smiled. Because I knew you'd run. Keanu chuckled nervously. This isn't about me. Exactly, Jim said. It's about what you made possible. But I didn't. You showed up, Jim said, cutting him off gently. Again and again. And now they're here to show up for you. Keanu looked down at his worn shoes, fidgeting with the sleeve of his coat. I never wanted this. Jim rested a hand on his shoulder. I know. That's why you deserve it. When Keanu stepped on stage, there was no dramatic music. No fancy lights. Just a single spotlight. And complete silence. Then slowly, one by one, people began to rise. First Caleb, the young musician. Then Maya, the little girl from the studio curb. Then the elderly woman with the note that saved her life. Then Jalen, the high school student who chose not to give up. Then more, and more, until the entire audience was on its feet. No one clapped. No one shouted. They just stood. Hands over hearts, eyes glistening, silent gratitude filling the room like music. Keanu's throat tightened. He wasn't an actor in that moment. He was a mirror, reflecting everything good people saw in themselves. Because of him, he stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, he said. Not for this, but for choosing kindness, even when no one's watching. The crowd stayed still. The notes were never about me, Keanu continued. They were about the ones who read them, the ones who chose to believe, when they could have walked away. He paused, then reached into his pocket. I want to leave just one more. He held up a folded piece of paper. I don't know who needs this, but it's yours now. He handed it to a young girl in the front row, her hands trembling. She unfolded it slowly. It read, You are exactly who the world needs today. KRR, and then The applause came. Not loud, not wild, just soft, honest, rising from every corner of the room. It wasn't for a celebrity. It was for a man who had shown people what it meant to care. In the weeks that followed, the Night of Notes became a documentary, not about Keanu, but about the people he had touched. The nurse who stayed at her post during the storm because of a letter taped to her locker. The teenager who stood up to a bully because someone left a message in his math book. The man who didn't end his life because a note in a bathroom stall simply said, "Hold on, the world still needs you." And through it all, Keanu refused interviews. He just kept showing up, one small moment at a time. Months later, Jim and Keanu sat on a hill overlooking the city. Sunset was painting the sky in deep oranges and pinks. "You ever regret not taking credit?" Jim asked. Keanu shook his head. "No, because it was never mine to take. Kindness doesn't belong to anyone. It's borrowed. Passed hand to hand. Heart to heart." Jim looked at him with quiet admiration. "You know," he said, "I called you what every man aspires to be." Keanu smiled gently. "You were wrong," he said. Jim raised a brow. "I was." Keanu nodded. "I'm just what every man already is, when he chooses to listen, to care, to believe. We all have it. We just forget." Jim was quiet, and then, with a soft laugh, he added, "Well, you're the reminder." Keanu didn't respond. He just watched the sky as the last bit of light dipped below the horizon. And somewhere in the city below, a young boy found a note tucked into a library book. "Someone is proud of you. Keep going." A stranger. He smiled, folded it carefully, and whispered to himself, "One day, I'll leave one too." And so, the chain continued.